apparently I am now Mizpah and you are now me. So,
Right.
so what I need you to do is we're going to do this. This is great. This is really, really funny. I'm going to do this. Nope, that's not going to work.
No, I have to
do this. You need to do the thing. Welcome to Monday.
And what I'm going to do is
turn your camera off.
Way.
Yep. And I'll go that way.
And then come back in this way. There we go. Works.
Yay, I'm no longer Mizpah. Don't feel dirty anymore.
Hey, wait. I'm now offended.
No, it's more or less a matter of I want to be me. I don't want to be somebody else. Me being somebody else is a bad thing.
But I had a bath today and everything.
Duh. But I'm still me, and I'm happy being me. Doing technical difficulties with Mizpah and Pseudo. Welcome to MMOBuff. Welcome to Monday. Holy cow. But yes, hopefully, and I think people may have missed what I was trying to say before we went live. We've made some changes here at MMOBuff, and they're going to be implemented over the week. And for those of you who are here, you guys get the luxury of hearing about it because, yeah, you guys get to be the first people to hear about it. Most of the time, as people know, whenever we finish a show within 24 hours, we're usually able to put our shows up on YouTube. We're shifting things a little bit. So what's going to end up happening is all of our shows from the week are going to go up on the weekend, and they'll pretty much be revealed throughout the weekend because it's an interesting methodology. We're just trying it for a couple of weeks to see how it works. But if you who are kind enough to have already been subscribing to us, you can always, watch the stuff on Twitch if you're that eager. But if not, it's going to be up on YouTube. It'll just take roughly about a week to do so. However, as I was trying to say, this brings a new thing to MMOBuff.TV, and it allows me to flex my non-comedian muscles. And I am now going to give you the link, and you will see this appearing roughly every Monday. And what I'd like to get from people is feedback on it, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it a fun thing, but at the same time informative. Mizpah, I don't think, has even seen this yet.
No, I saw it while you were having your brief technical difficulties. You gave me a chance to watch it.
There. It's not a watch thing, it's a read thing.
Well, I watched it, and kind of the letters flowed into my brain.
You have letters flowing into your brain? Should I oh no, because no, you're not going to, the Cookie Monster won't do it, although he does do the ABCs.
That won't help.
No.
But we should just add, this is not anything nefarious here before someone thinks we're trying to do something like make people sub to watch. It's just trying to find a good way of basically using time. It's going to be a lot easier to batch process all of the uploads and show management, and probably cut down our time doing it by about 17 thirds, something like that.
17 thirds, roughly speaking, although it's probably a little bit more like 17 6/8.
Possibly. We'll have to wait and see. But we're not here to talk about changes in show format, though we need to let people know about them. Mm-hmm. We are, however, here to talk about the topic of the day on this, which is episode 37, I do believe.
It is. Can you believe it?
There you go. No, it's going to be an interesting episode in a few episodes' time. We should have to wait and see exactly what happens. So, content pacing.
Hold on. I have to point something out. Right, Kachi Gustav, I did not fail at math yesterday. I failed at math on Saturday. At least I get the days right.
Yep. Pseudo only ever fails at math on a day that has Y at the end of it.
You are lucky I'm not at the studio. What I should have done when I showed up at the studio yesterday is I should have smacked you a few times just to bank up the points of which you...
Would this be before or after I served dinner?
Probably the entire time. A little bit before, maybe during, a little after, maybe a little
We'll
dessert
have it as an
smack.
aperitif. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a little bit.
I'm not sure I like this idea. I'm going to have to stop inviting such dangerous guests around for dinner.
Yeah. Saturday was our top draw Infinity Wars day, by the way, Ryakachi. Not Sunday. Sunday is a day of, production and stuff.
And Gothic, I would just like to say for the record, there were no frozen pizzas involved. Anywhere.
However, if you look at his hand, I have already completely, hurt him through frozen pizzas. Yep. No, they're
evil things, frozen pizzas. I shall have no more to do with them.
But yes.
However...
Also, a huge big help to Gwynth, who is doing moderating for us today.
Indeed.
Now you can talk.
Should we move on to the topic of the day?
No,
Am I allowed?
I'm going to continue to troll you in some way, shape, or form. Every time
Okay,
you go to say something,
carry
I'll
on.
interrupt. So there was this man, and he had a truck, and it was cool.
Was it a refrigerated truck?
It was, because he was carrying walruses places. Or is it walrus
Walrus removal services?
Walrus eye?
Walry?
Walry?
Walruses?
Walruses.
No, I'm afraid I do not know the plural noun for walry. It might be walry, but I've never heard that word used.
It's walruses.
Walruses.
Go ahead, Mizpah.
Should we move on to the topic, or should we just carry on trolling each other?
You can try, and welcome, Avid Guru. Don't worry,
Okay.
You didn't miss much.
Avid Guru is here. Now we can start. So, today's topic, episode 37, content pacing.
Yeah.
Something we've actually just been doing a little bit of. So, let's start at the very beginning. Before we talk about, how should content be paced, we'd better give a quick explanation of it. So, Pseudo, content pacing. What do we mean when we talk about content in a gaming context?
Well, it depends mostly on the type of game, but in general, there is a piece of content, be it a war battleground or a zone or a dungeon or raid or an instance. There is a piece of content that you are not able to have access to until a certain set of criteria are met. Now, we've done a show previously on MMOBuff all about gating, period, and whether or not something is there, but there is a methodology to the madness of gating, and there have been some recent MMOs that are looking at coming out and not using your typical gating experience, and thus it's a more matter of us really digging into what content pacing is, why it's there, is it worth it, and the different types of content pacing that are out there. Is there actually a secret to the success? Is there a method to the madness? So content could be anything. It could even be gear. Gear may not be accessible to you until you have done a specific set of quests, or certain quests may not be available to you until you've completed a certain zone. All that kind of stuff is actual different types of gating of content. But there is a method to the pacing. How quickly do you let people move from one piece of content to the next?
Yeah. So an easy way to define content then is going to be access to an activity or a continuation of a storyline. Is that a snapshotted enough definition to cover it?
It's a snapshot. I would literally just say content, period, because it could be anything. Gear itself isn't necessarily a piece of content, but it is something that you may not be able to get access to.
No, but I wouldn't state that a piece of gear falls under the definition of content pacing. Nor would I call gear content. The content for me would be the dungeon you're doing. The gear is a side effect of doing that dungeon. It might be for your character its primary aim, but it isn't critical to the telling of an event or the continuation of the story, or the day we killed the big bad walrus at the end of the dungeon. Now, the walrus happened to drop the tusk of awesomeness. That's fine. But it doesn't change the story, so to speak. The walrus still died at the end of the dungeon.
Well, fair enough, but at the same time, you may have to kill the walrus many times to collect many tusks in order to build a key, which allows you to access something else, which is another part of it.
And that would fall onto it, but gear per se, I guess we probably need to take it out of the equation a little bit, because then you're just getting into content. I can put it back in if you want, but we'll touch on that later. Yes. So the developer producing a game has actually got a tough call to make. How quickly do you want players to be able to flow through the content in the game?
You need to specify we're talking MMOs here, because there's a huge difference between, say, trying to do a non-MMO content.
Yes, let's say
pacing.
MMOs.
So this is all, for those of you watching, today is MMOs. It is an MMO discussion, although we do cover a lot of different topics and genres in this show. Today is the MMO.
Okay. So I am producing the Honey Badger MMO game once more, apparently. And we now know that walruses... Well, this game's getting more fleshed out every few weeks, so we now know that walruses are end bosses in dungeons. That's fine. We can work with that. And I have got thousands of players playing my game. Lucky me. But I need to decide at what speed are they going to be able to move through the content in the game. Now, there's two approaches at polar ends of the scale and lots of things in between. One approach is I can turn around and say, I can let players flow through the content in my game as quickly as they can consume it. Don't put anything in a player's way. If they're able to kill boss 1, they can go to place 2. If they can kill boss 2, they can go to place 3. In very simplistic terms.
Mm.
I may have all of my content lined up ready to go. I may push it all out the door on day 1. And if someone just does lore quests in my game, they could just do lore quests and understand the whole lore about the game, the story, the world, and why the evil space alien walruses are intent on taking over all of the hamsters, or whatever it might be. Now, that's one approach, but there's usually a problem with that approach. And that problem is simply that we, as players of games, are consumers of content that more resemble a wave of hungry locusts than anything else.
I was going to say aardvarks, but we could go with locusts.
The speed at which players can consume content, they dive in, there's always someone that will level faster, kill a boss quicker, find a more efficient way of doing something. Human beings always take the path of least resistance, and that often means they'll end up playing your game perhaps in the way that you didn't expect, but with the effect of, well, it's now Monday afternoon and I've killed all 10 bosses, what do I do now? And if you allow that to happen too much, it's got to be bad for the game. And then comes the issue of content pacing. How frequently do you release content? What barriers do you put in the way of content? What methods have you actually got to control the speed at which players move through your game? So we'll start with this one, Pseudo, as a question. Allow people to consume any content in your game at any pace that they're capable of doing so, good or bad.
I think you need to just take one more step back, because to be perfectly honest, in the end, that's what people do anyway. People will try to just beat whatever is out there, depending upon what their goal is and what the game's entire design is. I think it's worth mentioning that, in an MMO, people expect iterative updates in some way, shape, or form. We're now moving into the age where it's no longer we're waiting for the expansion for new content or the patch that comes out once every 8 months that brings new dungeons or something like that. People almost have this desire to see something at least once a month, because then it sort of justifies the subscription payment that you made, or it justifies the money that you've paid into the cash shop or something along those lines. It all depends. But if you have content scheduled for a certain type of iterative updating and release, there is something to be said about just allowing people free reign. Consume all you can, because in the next 2 weeks, another piece of content will be coming out. Because in 2 weeks after that, another piece of content. It depends on the type of cycle that you're trying to develop. And it also depends on the type of game and what type of content you're bringing. Because it's not always PvE content that comes out in patches or in updates. It's not always lore.
It has to be stated. I don't think we can make the assumption of monthly content updates or bi-weekly or whatever.
That's why I said it depends.
There are games that are going to patch content at different timescales.
Well, yeah.
Whereas we see it in Asian MMOs, and we're seeing it more recently in current releases, it's still not the norm, say, in WoW, to see brand new content every single month. So
Currently,
there's plenty of time.
Who knows what they do with Warlords of Draenor? We don't have a lot of the answers, but it just seems that there's this trend going on with the type of content that is being made accessible to the player for them to consume and swarm around like a crazy bunch of rabid aardvarks. I like that better than swarming like locusts. I don't know why. I'm just going to stick with it. But there is this huge difference there, because honestly, people play games to have fun, to challenge themselves. Some people are competitive by nature. I recently found out while streaming this past week that there are some people who, even if they're playing a single player game, refuse to play it for fun. They only play it for challenging themselves. And I'm like, well, what's the point of playing the game if you're not having fun? But to them, challenging themselves is fun. But when you have content that is available, if you if you don't have something that lets people know when new content is coming out, if you don't let your players, and communication is something we stress, if you're a developer and you're making a game, I don't care what game you're making, whether it's an MMO or not, if you do not communicate with your fans, with your, I was about to say employees, but they're not your employees. If you don't share with the people who are consuming your content when updates will be, you're going to end up what ends up happening, or what has happened before in the past to WoW. A new expansion comes out, people consume it, and then go away.
So let's step back then to the question. But let's go with a yes/no, because I have my views. I actually don't know where your views are.
Wait a second. We actually asked yes/no questions in this. I thought we asked open-ended questions.
Well, I'm asking a yes/no one on purpose to see where we go. So, should you allow players to consume all of your content as fast as they can at whatever point you put it out there?
Yes. But of course, there's stipulations with this. Nothing is ever black or white. Nothing is ever yes or no on this show. But there is stipulation, because if I put content out there for my players, they should be able to get to it as soon as they can. Now, whether or not I gate them through saying you must complete this boss kill with your aardvark where you capture the tusk of Epiphany and you must do it 12 times, that's a decision and a design choice. But if it's out there, if it's in the game, if it is on the public server, so to speak, I believe players should have the ability to consume as fast as they want to consume. Or conversely, as slow as they want to consume. So if it's in the public server, if you can get past the gating that I've done, have at it. So yes, my answer is yes, with a bunch of little checkmark caveats.
Okay, we're probably not in a very different place. Let's take some examples from recently. We've both been playing WildStar, so we'll use this as a quick frame of reference. There's an activity in the game called attunement. For those that don't play the game, this is to do with giving you the right to walk through the door of the 20-person raid content, which is the one of the two raid types in the game. Now, to be attuned, you have to do this quite long 13-step quest. And some of the steps are pretty hard, it's got to be said. They include things like beat every dungeon in the game above this difficulty level. And some of those are quite big asks in their own right. So here we have a system which is effectively pacing the access to content in the game. Mm-hmm. There's another example of this in this self-same quest chain. You had to buy something called a Genesis key to actually get onto this quest. This basically gave you the key, and you had to imbue it, complete other quest steps. Now, that cost, I believe, 150 Elder Gems. But you could only earn 140 Elder Gems a week. So it's a classic example. Has now changed. Mm-hmm. It's a classic example at the time of controlling the pace of content consumption. Not by not putting something out there, not by saying this isn't available till later, but by creating an environment where players would have to take 2 weeks to get to this step, even if they've played 23 hours and 59 minutes a day.
Right.
Every day. It would still take them that long. Yes, before someone pointed out there are mathematical things like they could have got, every boom box could have had an Elder Gem in that week, or something like that, but those are really unusual edge cases.
Well, there's always outliers. But see, there's always outliers. I want to throw out there, Gustav, aka Raikachi, says his idea. Dynamic content exploring. Rather than letting people wait with new patches / updates, I try to finish a game as much as possible, then let them dynamically unlock the new content. Like you say, you clear A, then you unlock B. You clear B, you unlock C, and make that guild-wise. So finish it as a guild group, and the guild has access to new content. And my goodness, Gothic, please be careful. I hope you're okay. Poor Gothic, unfortunately,
please don't bleed. Please don't bleed on the carpet. Blood's quite hard to get out.
Hey, I just want to make certain he's okay. But to address your statement, Gustav, one thing sticks out about me that makes my head kind of want to go, not possible, dream on. And that is finish a game as much as possible. MMOs notoriously are iterative, have no quote unquote end story until the sunset of that game. And even then, a lot of developers don't write a quote unquote closing finale for a game to say this sums up all of the problems that people may have had with the lore. It's just sort of, hey, we're closing shop. So when it comes to trying to have content, or I should say a game finish as much as possible for an MMO, I would feel it's an impossibility because you would never get the game out, because you'd have to plan for people to have the ability to unlock content over the next couple years. I can see where you're coming from as sort of the gating mechanic, but you know, at some point in time, you have to let the beast out to the pasture to eat. Otherwise, the aardvark is going to starve.
It's great conceptually, but there have been things similar to that in the past. Not so much on a guild level, although I could see some fun and games being had with that. Yes,
I love that concept.
I do like that concept. But I'm going to go back and remind people of the opening of the gates of Anchorage.
Not everybody's done them.
One of the best examples of content pacing that I've ever seen. In fact, I'm actually say the best example of content pacing I have ever seen. Now, for people that don't know what happened with Anchorage, WoW, post-expansion, you were able to get together on your server to enter into a competitive race to see who could become Scarab Lord and open the gates to this whole new area and dungeon and lots of other stuff. And there was a big one-off server-wide event on each server when it happened. And this, if you had a server where lots of people got together collaboratively and went out and collected stuff and worked hard to get it done, then you would get this done in a couple of months and your server would have access to new stuff. And the way it played out both in storyline and content, it created rivalry between those people going to try and be the person to open it and their supporters and the enemy on the opposite faction. And it did so many good things to gameplay. But you had some servers, the referred to backwater servers at the time, where it took forever to get the gates of AQ opened. And I think, and this is stretching the memory banks, I think there was a case of them actually being forcibly opened on a server because it never got completed. I'm going to have to check my references of that. Yet others did it pretty soon. Now, I'm all for that sort of content pacing. So I'm going to try and spin us back around to the topic and go, so what are the questions someone's trying to answer when they go, how should we pace content? And we've got this spectrum. You've got kind of content locusts at one end of the scale who always achieve so much more consumption than you think is possible. And then you've got the really slow sort of access that a very part-time player will have to stuff. And you've got to, as a design choice, decide what you think your average is. What do you want most people to be able to do between content cycle updates? Do everything once? Do everything once, be sitting around waiting for new stuff? Still have stuff to do you haven't completed? Pseudo, your thoughts. Where should someone aim for on that scale?
See, this is the hard one because I'm going to try and do my best to remove the idea of it depends on the purpose of the game, because PvE is so different than PvP if those are focuses within a game. I'd almost say there's a certain amount of ease if it's PvP, because it makes a difference if you do the same battleground twice. It's a different gameplay experience because you're going up against humans, and humans inherently, unless you're playing the same team repeatedly and they follow the rule of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over the same way every single time, but always expecting a different result. And if you run, unless you run across that, which is why I'm a huge fan of entropy. But anyway, it's a science discussion, which we're not going to get into. But, you know, unless you end up in that situation, PvP has some viability and a little bit of flexibility because it gives people a chance to go up against each other. So the content pacing for that is substantially different than the content pacing for PvE content.
Okay. But let's just talk about your design for content release. Where should you be aiming for on that scale?
See, that's the thing. I unfortunately, we don't have access to metrics from a lot of games. I don't think they like to share those types of things. I'd actually shoot for somewhere just a little over the median. I would shoot for something a
By
little over
that,
the median.
do you mean the median player gets to consume everything once in a cycle, or the median player still has stuff left to do in a
Still
cycle?
has stuff left to do. This is why I
Okay.
would, because the way I look at it is, I would want to ensure that there's a reason for people to log back in beyond just simply the community atmosphere within a game. I want people to have a good time playing my game. I want people to enjoy it for
Yep.
whatever the design purpose may be. But at the same time, if I have it so that the medium player has access to everything once, it's actually going to slow things down so bad that even the median players are going to get themselves bored, because there is no such thing as a dead center median. There's always a little bit this way, a little bit that way. There just seems to be a bit more of a scattering in this particular graph around sort of this center area. So I want to shoot here. What I actually would do for content releases is shoot a little ahead of that. So no matter what the median player was doing, even if new content came out, they still had content left to consume from the previous stuff. Now, as to how much content I would make available, that again I'd have to refer to what my design purpose is for the game, because it will influence a big amount of my choice there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, therefore, you're happy with the idea that the content locusts, the fast consumers, they're going to blow through everything quickly, and they're going to go, well, I'll do it again, and I'll do it again, and what now? And
Yes,
of course,
and
they're
that
still
is-
going to be going, give me new stuff. Where's the
see,
new stuff?
That's where you have the different types of pacing in place, which is where it goes back to like the gear concepts and things like that. Because just because you've consumed the raid does not mean that the raid has fully been consumed. There is still so much that needs to be done, say, in a PvE environment, such as going forth and making certain everybody in that particular raid force
Yep.
has all the gear from
It's geared
that.
up.
And that is controlled by how often I let certain items drop versus how many pieces of items drop if I'm looking at the gear side of things. Aviguru says you can never satisfy the content locusts.
And I agree.
Sort of, I agree with that, but I think there are ways to add challenges to a game at end content that might help stop the tide a little bit. And that's where you start to see items like the legendary things from World of Warcraft or the awesome pinks from WildStar. If you put in that random, almost unattainable thing and have the drop rate hopefully set up so that at least one drop occurs for every couple guilds or so, the guilds then, who are the content consumers, now have another focus. Granted, it adds a whole nother set of problems, because when you start working on things like that and it's only one person who has this item who's trying to occur things, and everyone's kind of start to feel like they're just helping that person and nobody else, there are other issues with it. But there are things that you can implement, which is why I also think we have things like, random events that occur in bosses at event through holiday seasons and seasonal types of content. Because even if you are waiting for the big patch to come out in March, midway through March, February 14th is going to roll around. So there must be some kind of Valentine's Day event in game, which means as long as you kind of keep it relatively changing, that's still new content for people to consume that has nothing to do with the world story, so to speak, or nothing to do with the big bad dungeons and stuff like that.
That idea actually goes one step further. If you take a look at that particular example, the holiday events that are happening in Warcraft, if memory serves me right, doing all of these events with one character over the course of a year, the only way to do it, gives you the achievement What a Long Strange Journey It's Been, which gives you a protodrake. Can't remember the color. And, if you log in March, you can't possibly have done February's event if you weren't playing in February. So you cannot complete this meta achievement till next February. Now, the chances are pretty high if you're chasing an achievement with so many meta parts over a year, you're going to miss one. Whichever one you miss, you then still can't complete till the year after. So you've actually created a piece of content that's almost self-gating due to its size and complexity.
Yeah.
And most players are going to take 2 to 3 years to complete it, if at all. And they accordingly put a pretty hefty and unique reward behind it. This was at a point in time where protodrakes were kind of exceptionally rare. A few more have emerged since that first came out.
Well, see, that's the thing. when you talk about content, and we're talking about how you pace content in general, we have to realize there's more than one type of content. There are the people who are the locust swarmers, although I'm still going to stick with the hungry aardvarks. The hungry aardvarks towards the end game who are going to consume things so fast that they don't care about that achievement because it's not what they're after. They may be after the PvE raid firsts or boss first achievements and things like that. And that means more to them than, hey, it's been a long, strange journey. Who cares about that? And the thing is, you can't, I want to almost kind of go back and say, you can't please the locusts ever. I would almost stress that it's almost impossible to 100% please anybody in a game, but you can try to tackle as many different things that they're interested in as possible. So, for example, the people who are the achievement whores, the ones who really love going after those achievements, I am one of them, which is why it's so hard right now. But by not being able to complete or having tons and tons of achievements for them, you've got it sorted because they're going to be the ones who try to do the raid bosses at the same time as other stuff because they're after all the achievements. That is a player that you have pretty much guaranteed yourself for life. But if you get the people who are only interested in the role play scenario, so to speak, and very slowly move through the content so they can have role play stories around the content that's being revealed and things like that, that's a vastly different type of player. So if you bring a new PvP dungeon in content-wise, they're not going to give a flying wootsy-tootsie. They just don't care because it doesn't affect their
Unless
gameplay.
the story arc goes into that dungeon. And there's pluses and minuses of that, and you can see two contrasting approaches.
Yeah, but
from
there's
Blizzard and from Carbine.
But there are so many different types of content types that when it comes to pacing them all, I think you need to have a really good understanding of what it is that makes the player approach, what their motivation is for that type of content. PvP players have a completely different motivation than the role player.
Yep. So let's again just bring this back around again for a moment. So we're looking at a few things here. So we've identified that content pacing is not absolute. You can pace different sorts of content for different groups of players at the same time. Again, to use today's references, in WildStar, the Drusilla stories now are being updated. We've just seen this with the first post-patch update. So the story arc is evolving over time, and the speed of that evolution is tied into the patches.
Yeah.
Which, we're going to have to wait and see what the exact frequency is going to end up being, but it looks like being every 4 weeks or so. There's a reasonably major piece of content. We're also seeing that choices within the game make that content take some time to consume. For example, needing a certain amount of Elder Gems, needing a certain amount of read lots of reputation, which was one of my personal irks, because I did a classic and then I got leveled, started a tuning, had to stop at step 3 because I needed 32,000 reputation with the exiles, and I could only earn so much a day, so that slowed me down for 10 days. Now, I can argue the pluses and the minuses of the approach, but I think it has to be said that if their choices cause the majority of players to have nearly but not quite completed everything when new content comes out, I think they're probably in a good spot.
I agree with that, as long as people, see, this is the thing. When an MMO comes out, there's got to be a focus for the purpose for why it's going to stick around. Aeon was all about the PvP side of things. It was all about faction v faction, and that to me...
And grinding.
Well, that's the thing. It was about faction v faction. That in the end, it wasn't about the quests you were completing. It was about getting to the level so that you could do these gigantic world events where everybody was trying to kill everybody. And that's something exciting. So there was a purpose to that. If you're and I think this is honestly why it's taken me so long to find another MMO to play, to be perfectly honest with you. So many developers put a heavy focus on like the PvP aspect, because I honestly think it's a lot easier to do just PvP in a game than it is to try to balance out PvE mechanics. Because in a PvP situation, you bring up new battlegrounds, you can bring up new world events for everyone to fight over, etc. And that can be an exciting thing, but you don't have to put as much time and effort into balancing everything. And I think
I'm sure there are those that would debate that, because I would say that PvP balance is one of the hardest things to achieve. But you're talking about release of content in a PvP environment.
Exactly. I'm talking about release of content. Because in all honesty, it's a lot easier to bring content out for a PvP thing than it is for PvE. It really is. I think unless someone can prove to me otherwise, and I've had this debate with quite a few people, but no one can prove to me otherwise. But unless you can prove to me otherwise, the idea of trying to build not just the zone or the area, world environment in which an encounter occurs, along with the AI and everything else that goes with it, is much more difficult than just trying to build what you think would be an engaging match versus somebody else. And Screenager, I have seen you bouncing in and out of chat frequently. So if you happen to be watching, if you know of a difference that can prove where PvP is much more complex to develop new content for, please let me know. And Gustav, I asked you that as well because you're also from Master after.
And
yes,
chat is obviously not updating cleanly because I'm not seeing those people.
Well, I'm using 3 methods to keep my
method, yeah.
Yes, which is a very different thing.
Fair enough.
But yes.
Talking of chat, let's drop back into a couple of things that were said here. We
have an interesting debate going on across a couple of our individuals.
We do. I'm trying to read some of the longer comments and just pass them down into a couple of sentences.
Tell you what, you take the time to read this. I'm going to take the time to sit here and say to everybody, you know, if you have an idea for us or a topic that you'd like to see Mizpah and I argue about, because, you know, it's something that we do. Apparently people like to come to the show just to watch you and I pick on each other because they don't play MMOs, they're gamers. So they're a part of some of the other shows that we have here on MMO Buff. But in the end, they come here to see you and I poke fun at each other, troll each other. So yeah, if you guys have a topic you want us to cover, by all means, do let us know. Go ahead, Mizpah.
Okay. So here is the thing. Rakachi points out that he has a belief or an attitude to say that, look, I'm a developer. I've made the game. I've got my vision for the game, and here it is. Deal with it. Now, there is something to be said for that. And the something to be said is around the fact that if you're marketing your game and you say, this is what I want my game to be, then if you are doing that to stick to your intentions, I would say that's possibly no bad thing, because it means the game is not deviating away from the desires of the people that bought the game in the first place. However, there has to be clear two-way communication. Some do better than that than others. And it's got to be very tricky from a dev perspective or a CS perspective to say, what is whining? What is the vocal minority? What are the age-old adage of players not knowing what's good for them? What are the requests for power and gameplay that are not that helpful to the game's integrity? And when do you have to put your hands up and say, yeah, that's a better way of doing it? Because all that stuff is needed. Now, that's going to fall into content pacing, because obviously your design for your game covers the release of content stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, when it comes, it that's the thing, you know, if you know the purpose of your game, as long as you're just, here you go, it's all about the communication side of things. As long as you are clear about what it is you're trying to do, better. For example, look at the game, or look at when we were talking and we had Brad McQuaid and Salim Grant on the show, and we were discussing Rise of the Fallen. And they have a very specific style and design idea for their MMO, which is unforgiving to some people, which to some people, they look at it and go, why would you ever want to have a game like that? And yet they are unapologetic in stating, this is our intent. This is what we want to see. This is what we are looking to do. And as long as, you know, you have a developer that's incredibly clear about that, that's great. I mean, there's always going to be the developers out there who want to try to please all of the people, but that's, I'm going to tell you right now, a good way to have a game be destroyed. You don't want to please all of the people all of the time, because then in that case, no one's going to get pleased. It's an impossible pipe dream, and it'll make you lose sleep, make you lose hair, or grow hair in weird places. You don't want to put yourself through that kind of stress.
And I'm going to leave you to respond to the last comment in chat, or at least the last one that I can see at this moment in time.
How about this for a debate? Give me 1 second. Let me tap someone's shoulder real quick.
Yeah, I think we need to bring in the evidence here. It must be said.
Give me 1 second. We've had a question in chat, and I'm looking this way for a reason. Get ready for this. Asking,
Yes,
how
I'm
come
not that
Josie
side.
and Mizpah aren't a couple? Would you mind coming over here really quick for me, please? This is a debate for you as to why we aren't a couple, besides the fact that... No.
Do remember to keep this within our channel's ratings, please?
You see that? You see that right there? Now take a look at that. That man placed it on my finger almost 10 years ago, and I am incredibly content.
So there you go. Not guilty. Anyway.
It's... Oh, Skeevy.
Oh, I'm so hurt.
Oh, just... No, it's...
Shall I carry on?
Oh, yeah, please do. I've got, like, bugs crawling on my skin. Go ahead.
I'm offended now. I'm going to leave.
That's okay. I've got a screen set up for when you're gone.
Oh, that's okay. I'll go. That's fine.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Right. But yes, when it comes to Mizpah, no. It's kind of like asking why someone's not involved with their brother. It's really weird. But anyway. So, when it comes to things such as our discussion, what the... Content, pacing, takes time. What the heck? He's like a meerkat. Yes, I'm just going to ignore him. Apparently, someone would turn over to the dark side for you,
have to come back now.
I was going to say someone's apparently going to come over to the dark side for you, Miss, but because they like you. See? There are people in this world who like you.
I feel much better now.
But yes, content pacing, you have to know the different types of content, and you have to know it well as the audience that consumes that content. It's trying to build PvP content where you have battlegrounds changing every week is pretty much a good way to kill PvP in some respects. I mean, there has to be a balanced map, but you have to know the audience that consumes it.
Let me put this thought out then, because we've skirted around it. And there are many people going, give me more content, give me more content, give me more content. If you bring in
give me more content of the type I want is what you really should be saying.
Yes.
Yeah, what type I want now. I want more lore. I want more dungeons. I want more PvP.
And I want it yesterday.
I wanted it 3 days ago. Yes.
Now, if you do that, you're actually going to disenfranchise too many people away from your game, because many people now feel like it's unobtainable to consume the content you're putting down in front of them in a reasonable timescale. So too much flow of inbound content too fast is actually damaging.
Yeah.
No matter how attractive it seems in principle. Now, on the flip side, if you are too slow to release content, you can look at people now perhaps not over the moon. They're having to wait several months between the last update in WoW and the next big update. And I think it's going to be something like a 4-month wait, something of that nature. I'd need to check my dates. That's a Wednesday night question. Some people would argue that's too slow. So to me, as we've started to say, you put content in such a fashion that most people will feel it's obtainable to consume all the content, but it's a very big ask, and most of them won't quite achieve it. Yeah. But it feels achievable at the start of the process.
Absolutely.
But within that content, then you are going to want to slow people down in certain ways for 2 reasons. One of which is to make your content last. But actually, here's the second reason that perhaps people don't like to mention.
You have to challenge the player.
You do. But here's the thing that's going to be unpopular. I firmly believe you need to find ways to allow those players with either more time investment or a higher skill cap to be able to achieve things that others can't, so that they can start to differentiate themselves. Now,
Yeah.
some will argue that it's skill, some will argue just that it's time.
It
That's a whole new
depends.
debate.
It depends on the content type, because if you're clearing out all the zone quests and all of the different zones, that's a time thing. That's not a necessary skill thing. That's it. It depends on the content type. It really does. But yeah, I don't see why that would be an unpopular concept.
Because there are many people out there that feel that rewarding people that simply put more time in is not necessarily the way to go. So
It depends on what you're rewarding them
collect
for.
100 walrus tusks and get the super shiny walrus tusk weapon. And let's say you can only do the dungeon with the walrus in once a week, or once a day, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be some people to whom collecting it is achievable. Let's say do it up to 5 times a day.
Okay.
There'll be some people for whom collecting it is achievable. There's many for whom it's not. They don't have time to do that dungeon 5 times a day. Now, the sociology of it is those players that do, those players that manage to complete that in 20 days, and therefore get the item, are going to, internally or externally through strutting around with it, going to say, hey, look, I've done this. I'm good at this game. Here's my badge of honor.
Well, see, that's the thing.
It does make people invest in your game.
It does, but if you do something based on a time-based thing, okay? If you do something that's time-based, we'll just go with, a rep grind or something like that. And hi, Katamari, welcome. If you go something like that, at some point in time, everyone is going to have it. So people who start out with being the special little snowflakes because I have the Walrus Tusk and Aardvark Ears of Doom and nobody else has it yet, is going to slowly not feel like they're worth anything, which means you need to have content available.
That's okay, because new content will have come in.
You need to have new content available to allow them to try to figure out a way to make themselves, in a way, I don't want to say make them feel better about themselves, but, give them goals to achieve to so that they can have something to show for their achievements, be it the time they've spent, be it the hard work they've put into mastering how a dungeon or a PvP event works or whatever. You have to have something to do that, which is why when you asked me earlier, I put it above the median. I would. Because in the end, I don't want, when I have a new piece of content to come out, I don't want to have everything be completed at least once by the median player. I want there to always be something that makes them want to either log in again, or spend a little bit more time, or even in some cases, I want them to go, cool, I am not going to be able to get to the new content until I finish this content, but I know it's there now, so maybe they'll have an extra impetus to go. And on top of that, it allows me to have an iterative approach for my content patch releases, where 1 week I may put a heavy focus on PvP, or one patch release or one release of content heavy on PvP, and the people who are in the median who are trying to catch up aren't going to feel like they don't have something to do because they're still trying to catch up with what happened in the PvE release, the previous content release before. Now, this is not to say that all the releases should be staggered like that. I mean, there's a way to do a whole bunch, but in the end, people want to have an engaging game. And MMOs have a unique ability to bring constant new iterative content updates. And trying to figure out the right way to balance is going to take, I think, time. You start with a guess, and it's through actually reading the metrics over time as to what type of community you've actually attracted that you can start to really tailor things to best fit the community that you have building, the new players, the old players, etc. And I think these are concerns that were not there way back in the day when EQ started, way back in the day when World of Warcraft started. The MMO gamer has evolved. And I think
content pacing, have devs in communication.
Absolutely. And I think content pacing and the way that content is paced in new games, as well as new changes that are coming for old games, is going to show just how much that's evolved. And if nothing else, it's an exciting time to be an MMO player.
Okay, so let's sum up, because I think we've come to the same conclusion, and I can draw out some more sort of sub-conclusions from it as well.
Hold on a second. We agreed on something?
We do. It looks as if we do. You want to be releasing content with some form of regular schedule. Ideally with a similar time gap between releases. Ideally you want those gaps to be reasonably small, and I think you're better off making a couple of smaller updates rather than one big update, depending on what you're doing. Within your updates, ideally you want to be cycling your focus between different things. So at different points in time, people feel like they are the main topic of your update. That's all well and good. We're then suggesting that you really want your content to be targeted in such a way that, as we said, just above the median. Most players, it will feel achievable for them to consume it all, but most won't actually do so.
Yeah.
It does mean that those that are particularly slow won't feel like they're too far behind, but they're never going to really be at the front edge of content anyway.
Yep.
Your content locusts, yes, they're going to fly through it and go, give me more stuff. And of course that message is loaded with what they really mean is give me more stuff that I'm focused on. And hey, I'm not actually decrying that. It's human nature. I'm just putting that marker around it. Now,
it's got to be acknowledged.
Within that, you need bigger challenges. This is why you need reputation. This is why you need grinding. Much as we don't like grinding, much as I don't like sitting there saying, but I've got my Genesis key, I have to wait another 10.4 days to get my 32,000 XRs rep in the case of WildStar recently. It's needed. It's needed to put a balanced approach on content, and B, to give people a way of separating themselves through others through the process of comparison and competition. Give people the ability to put effort in to be that special snowflake for a small period of time. And then start throwing in your new content on top again, and again. You put all of that together, you have content pacing.
Yep. Right,
next episode, done.
It's sort of. Sort of. Here's what we're going to do. There's something that's going to be appearing on the screen right now. So over there, this gives you guys a list of all the stuff that's coming up on MMOBuff, and why that happens. Mizpah and I are going to talk about something important, something that is life-changing, something that is so serious that I need Mizpah's serious face.
Was this the fact that I invited you for dinner at the weekend?
No. Put on your serious face, Mizpah. I need to know who would win in a fight. A meerkat or an aardvark?
The meerkat.
Why?
It's carrying an Uzi.
And is it in a trench coat, wearing pink boxers out of curiosity?
For people that don't get that reference, you're excused.
Katamari made a brilliant image of Mizpah as a honey badger. And for those of you who actually understand the concept of the honey badger, that's great. Meerkats are not honey badgers. Okay? So, not worth it. Not happening. But yes, so we have all these things coming up on MMOBuff. Do be sure to check them out. Also, make certain you go to our website, because we've got some new things showing up on our website, which you're definitely going to want to be a part of. On top of that, for everyone who is interested in getting in touch with me so far, who has been looking at either helping us through moderating or writing pieces for us for MMOBuff.TV's website, or even just helping out in the variety of different shows, because we have a variety of different types of roles we need. Thank you so much for getting in contact. Bring me more. I need more peoples. But yes, next week on MMOBuff, the podcast, the topic, we don't know yet. We're going to let you guys let us know what you want us to talk about. And I am not going to spend an entire episode belaying why Mizpah and I are not a couple, because it's like I said, marrying a brother is very weird, or that's just... Now, Mizpah and I have very much so a brother-sister relationship. There is no two ifs, ands, or buts about that one. It's one of those things. You touched my dolly! Sorry, Mizpah, I'll put it back. I am totally implying that Mizpah has dolls. And you do, which is
You've
hysterical.
so offended me so many times on this show.
Have I?
Yes.
Oh. See, I haven't got the balance between being offensive and trolling yet. I still need to go back to troll boot camp. Damn. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm trying to properly troll you. And I seem to be failing. Yay. But yes, it's more like, the whole, fights. I totally expect him to, like, yank my hair, and then I'll, like, steal his toys, and it's just...
I can still run faster, so that's okay.
Yeah, he can, but I'm really good with the whip. I was going to say a lasso, but whip came to mind, so we'll just go with that. So for some reason, Mizpah in my brain has turned into a cow, and I just see these lassos going around going, hog tie him.
Moo?
It's just one of those things. But
Should we talk about the shows?
No, we don't need to because all that information is there. I will state this. The big thing to keep in mind for this week is we do have a guest on tomorrow's campfire. We have Benjamin coming back from Gashkia, and we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff. And you may hear whining in the background.
Benjamin
Gashia?
coming back from Gashkia.
Benjamin
coming
Foley,
back from Gashia.
who is from Gashkia, will be joining us on Tuesday on the campfire. And we also have coming up on the data mine, we have Patrick Kowalik, who is the lead artist for Elysian Shadows, coming to talk about art in game development. And we have quite a few topics, etc. And Moom, Mizpah 2014.
Indeed.
Totally.
And interjecting again, but not with a moo this time. Wednesday, of course, Blizzard Forecast, we have some more giveaways. They're going to include things like this. He says quickly, and hiding it again. But other things as well. You shall have to wait and see.
He's such a weirdo, but that's okay. That's the way that works. So yes, it leaves me to say to all of you guys, I love seeing the conversations that you guys have in chat because you guys have amazing ideas, and I like to see the debates between everyone. So yay. We will be having an after stream today. So this is for just the people who are on YouTube. I do apologize. Live show gets a bit more of us. So toodle pip. We'll be right back for you all. But for the people on YouTube, you're not going to see this. Do you want to say your bye-byes, Mizpah?
Signing off as always.